So welcome back. This is the third video on the questions, the programming exercises for Chapter 2. So problem 7 is the next one. We're being asked to write a program that uses exactly 4 for loops to print the sequence of letters below. So let me just copy this sequence so that we can use that as a reference, and let's go into PyCharm. So in PyCharm, I'm going to create a new exercise or a new Python file, which is going to be exercise 7. Okay, now the thing that we're looking to build is this. So the first for loop is going to print this group of A's. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 A's. So I'm going to go for I in range 0 to 10, and I'm going to do print A. Now one thing I need to do is I need to make sure that there's no end line in here. So in this particular case I'm going to do an end with a empty string so that it doesn't do a new line for each character that's being sent there. Now the second for loop, I'm going to be printing out the B's. So in the B's there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 of the B's. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to go in this case for 0 to 7, and in this case I'm printing B's. The next one, we have a CD combination, so it's CD, CD, that's 2, 3, 4 CDs. So my third for loop is going to look like this. Instead of just a single character, I'm going to do a CD. Now the last segment I have an E followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 F's and then a G. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to print out the E. So let me just copy this. And this one won't be in a for loop because I'm only going to be printing one of those. And at the same time, let me print out the final print statement, and then I need a for loop for the F's that are going to be in there. So what did I say? There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 F's. So I'm going to do in the range 0 to 6. And in this case, I'm doing an F. And I'm going to let my last statement go ahead and add a new line to that. So let's see what happens when I print this. I'm going to put a comment up here so that that doesn't get evaluated. And let me run my code. Okay, so what you see is the statement right there. Let me just copy that and compare it. Looks like it did exactly what we intended for it to do. So that's that. Okay, so for the next problem, number 8 is requesting us to write a program that asks the user for their name and how many times to print it. The program should print out the user's name the specified number of times. So let's create a new exercise for this, a new file. This is going to be exercise 8. And in this one, we're going to be prompting the user for the number of times to print the name. It's going to ask the user for their name and how many times to print it. So the first input is going to be name, and that's going to be equal to input, and I'm going to request please enter your name. And the second input is going to be number of prints. So I'm going to do an input on this one, and I'm going to make this an integer. So I'm going to enclose that in a casting of the integer function. Okay, and input, and then this one I'm going to say, please enter the number of times to print your name. Alright, and after that, now we can actually use that. So we're going to create a for loop for I in range 0. So we're going to be starting off at 0, and we're going to be going up to the number of times. So we're going to use that variable num. And now we're going to do print name. And that's it. So let's see how this executes. Please enter your name. Helps if I spell it right. Please enter the number of times to print your name. Let's say 10. Okay, so there's my name being printed 10 times. The next problem is number 9. The Fibonacci numbers are sequenced below, where the first two numbers are 1 and each number thereafter is the sum of two preceding numbers. Write a program that asks the user how many Fibonacci numbers to print and then prints that many. So in this case, we need to start off by creating this sequence. So let's work through a problem on how to do that. So let's create a new Python file called exercise 9. Now, this Fibonacci series is basically going to be a for loop. So let's go ahead and ask the number of numbers to print. So we're going to create a variable num, and that's going to be input, and we're going to prompt the user to say, please enter the number of Fibonacci numbers to print. And this again is going to be a string when it's first entered, so I'm going to cast that as an integer. And now we can use our Fibonacci series creation. So the way we're going to be creating the Fibonacci series is we need to actually, the Fibonacci series is basically each of these numbers. The number 2 is created by adding up the previous two sequence, or 2 in the sequence. 3 is gotten by adding the previous 2 in the sequence, so 1 plus 2 is 3. 5 is gotten by adding 2 plus 3 is 5. 8 is gotten by adding 3 plus 5 is 8. 13 is gotten by adding 5 plus 8 is 13, and so on. And so we need to prime the sequence, and then we can use a for loop to estimate those numbers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called last, which is going to contain the previous number, and we're going to prime that with the number 1. And then then I'm going to do a second last. Okay, so the variable second last is going to be another 1, and then we're going to calculate the value of the next, and that's going to be equal to last plus second last. Okay, so now we have the ability to create each of these individual numbers. Now, what we want to do is we actually want to create a loop that will have the number of Fibonacci numbers to print. Now, in the event that the number that is entered is equal to 1 or 2, then we would just print out these additional ones. But if the number is 3 or greater, we would be printing out the number that is calculated by this next command. So let's go ahead and handle the case where we have either 1 or 2 numbers to be printed. So in that case we would say maybe what we ought to do is we ought to restrict this to be between 3 and greater. And so what we want to do here is we want to now go into this for loop. And so we're going to do for I in range 3 to num. So in the case where num is greater than 3, or greater than or equal to 3, it will output the number. So let's print these ones first. So we're going to do print last, comma, second last. Actually, I want to reverse the order of that one. And I also want to create a separator. So we're going to do a separator is going to be equal to comma space. So we get a comma in between each of those numbers. And the other thing I want to do is I want to do an end and set that equal to blank so that it doesn't automatically add a new line on the end of the print statement. So I think that's correct. It's squawking about something here. Not sure why it's giving me an error. I don't think it likes that variable, so let me change that second last to start with a letter, because you're not supposed to start it with a number. And here I can do second last. Okay, so now I have last and second last as my variables. Now inside the for loop I need to do another print statement. So this is going to be print last, or no, print next. And we're going to be using a separator and the end again in this statement here. Okay, and so the next thing we need to do before we exit out into the next iteration of the for loop is we need to assign last to second last. So second last is going to be set equal to last, and last is going to be set equal to next. That way we save the previous value for the next iteration through the for loop, and this should give us what we want. So let's see what happens when we run this. Okay, so let's enter the number 3 and see what happens with that. Okay, 1, 1, so that obviously didn't work quite right. We need to change this to 2. That's the reason why. Okay, let's try running that again. Okay, so we're going to enter a 3 there. So that didn't quite work exactly the way we wanted it to, because it appended the 2 onto the end of that. And so one of the things we need to do is we need to add, instead of doing it like this, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add our string in the beginning with a comma and a space there, and we won't use the separator because we're just printing a single variable, and so we're going to prepend this thing with a comma so that each time it'll add on to the end of the list with a comma and a space. The other thing I want to do is I want to put a space after here so it's a little bit neater. And let me hit run again. And so now we're inputting 3 or greater, so let's do 3. Now that gives us approximately what we want, with the exception of I didn't need the extra space there, it looks like, because there's already a separator there on that one. So let me try running it again. Okay, number 3. Okay, that looks good. Let's try running it again, and I'll enter the number 7. Oops. Okay, so it looks like we have an error there. Let me try running that again. So this is the number 7. Okay, that looks right. Okay, let's try running it with 15. Okay, so it looks like this is working properly. We're getting the right Fibonacci numbers here, and so that looks correct. Anyway, I'm going to pause it here, and we'll continue on in the next video.